Hello, dear friends. In this video, I'm going to talk about restoration comedy. But before restoration comedy, we have a lot many things to understand to answer the questions they ask us in NET JRF exam. So on the screen, you can see I have written like restoration period. First of all, let us understand the meaning of the word restoration. As I have already given 3 points here, that it is the restoration of the monarchy in 1660, because before that, because of Puritan Commonwealth, the Puritan people, those who did not like king, and because of the civil war in England, Charles I was killed, and his son Charles II fled to France. In the coming lecture, I'll also inform you like why he went to France only. And when he was brought back, because after the civil war ended, people of England understood that that period was quite strict in terms of political and moral concerns. So they brought the king back, the heir apparent Charles II. So restoring monarchy after Commonwealth is the main reason this period is called Restoration period. So I hope you have understood. Second is it marks the return of Charles II, as I already told you, and this restoration period is the revival of theatre, arts, and court culture. Now, here you require a very small lecture that why it was a revival of theatre, arts, and court culture. Because Puritan people, Puritanism is a particular kind of Protestantism in which this particular religion is also called Calvinism. In that, they consider that one should be away from art, entertainment, because it makes you away from God. So they were all against, because in the long parliament, most of the parliamentarians were Puritans, and they were opposing the spreading of theater, arts, and court culture. Court culture here means they were quite open in their manners. So they were moral policing them, the Puritan people, and they were quite strict in their moral behavior. So when all these things came back to England with Charles II, we also say that it was a revival of theatre, arts, and court culture. I hope you have understood. Third point I have given is in literature, it is especially known for the revival of drama. So in the coming lecture, I'll inform you that theatres were closed on September 2, 1642, officially. So, and in 1660, when Charles II came back, they started the drama back. So particularly Restoration comedy was the main kind of drama which was presented on the stage. So which focused on wit, satire, aristocratic life, and sexual intrigue. These are the topics actually, which became quite famous with the starting of Restoration comedy. That why it was comedy, because two people on stage, they were exchanging witty dialogues, they were satirizing on each other or one another in the play. Then they were showing and mocking sometimes the aristocratic lifestyle, and there was also kind of sexual plottings and sexual intrigues means the kind of plotting they were doing against each other to get the favor of one lady or the other gentleman. So these things created laughter. Then I have given my my lectures are always important from 2 points of view, dear friends. One, that you should understand the whole history and political and social and cultural history while you understand, because they ask you questions regarding that. And second thing, direct questions which they give you. For example, the next point, you see that approximate literary date of Restoration period. So you will find that in the books of history of English literature, some books say that it was from 1660 when Charles II came to 1700, and some people say that it was from 1710. I mean, till 1710, because certain dramatists were writing that kind of drama till 1710. Now let us take a look on the kind of different kinds of names given to restoration period, because you also get a question on that. Dryden was the main writer who was presiding over the stage at that time. So this age is also called Age of Dryden. His dramas, his comedies, his tragedies, heroic tragedies, particularly, and in the same period, apart from the drama, his satires were also famous. So you can say his translations were famous. His essay on dramatic poesy was very famous. So this is also called Age of Dryden. Then this is also called the Age of Charles II, because because of his influence. Now you would say, like, why his influence is important? Because his mother was a French, and when Charles first, his father, was killed, he took shelter in France. He also went to other countries also, better educated countries, and from there he learned many things. So when he came back to England, his influence, because you all should know that king is always the patron and custodian of art and culture, because he gives profusely money for art and culture. So because of his taste, the kind of his taste was there, the things prevailed accordingly. So this age is also called Age of Charles II. I hope you have understood it. And the third is the Restoration Age, as I have already informed you that monarchy was restored. Clear? And sometimes included in the this age is also called the neoclassical period sometimes, though you will be surprised that neoclassical period starts from 1700 only. But because just now we studied that restoration period also extended till 1710, so you can also say that it's late 17th century neoclassical period. Neoclassical means writers were more inclined to write by on the footsteps of the classical writers. So they were behaving like they are also classical. Decorum, the polished heroic couplet, heroic tragedies, the kind of writings which classical period writers wrote. They were just imitating them and polishing their art. So that is why this period was called neoclassical. Neo means new, a kind of new classical age. Date of closing of theaters, 2nd September 1642. You should remember it. You can make notes of it. And what happened? Actually, Long Parliament. The Parliament at that time was called Long Parliament. It ordered all theaters in England to be closed. Now the question arises, why the theaters were closed? So that I have already informed you. So you can save your time, that there was a moral objection from the Puritan people, because they considered that drama and art, the things of art, make you away from God. And Puritans considered that the ultimate aim of man is to please God. So sexual behavior was shown in theaters, particularly in the plots. So they were against it. So they just totally banned them. And religious belief, that plays were seen as sinful distractions from religion. So that I have already informed you. Then you can see political instability was there, because English Civil War, that question has already appeared in the exam, 1642 to 1651. That is the period of English Civil War. That there were people who were in the supporters of the Puritan people. There were certain people who were towards the king's side. They were called royalists. Clear? So a kind of civil war was there. So because of that unrest, people did not visit theaters, and dramas were not written, and the rest of the things that the drama was, theaters were closed. Association with monarchy, theaters were connected with royalist court culture. As I told you that kings are the patrons of dramas and all. So theaters, when the king was not there, so obviously patron was not there. So Puritans opposed these, and the theaters were closed. Why the period is called Restoration? So it was the restoration of monarchy. It was the restoration of House of Lords again. It was the restoration of royalist culture, and restoration of theaters and public entertainment. So you can now understand that it was completely an age of restoration. Then Charles II's exact date, because this question was also asked, it was 29th May 1660. That is very important actually, that he officially entered England, particularly London, and officially regained the throne. and it was his 30th birthday also. So you understand that, symbolically also the date was very important. Why Charles II went to France after the execution of Charles I, his father? So I have already told you that this date is also important. You can write that Charles I was executed on 30th of January 1649. And after his father's execution, England became a republic under Oliver Cromwell. This is a very famous name. And royalists were in danger of execution or imprisonment, so they fled from there. And Charles II fled to continent Europe for safety. Now, I raised a question like why he went to France only. So his mother, Queen Henrietta Maria, was a French. So you all understand that French royal court supported the Stuart family. That was the Stuart, their lineage was Stuart. Tudor, Stuarts, Plantagenet, these are the names. Like in India, we had Chandravanshi, Suryavanshi. Okay. So that was the Stuart family, that was supported by the French royal court. And political protection and financial assistance was given to them. And Charles II, another important question for all of you, that did he only go to France? No, he also visited the Netherlands while he was saving his life, and Spain also during his exile period. So three countries, he lived. And all these three countries were far better than England at that time from art point of view, culture point of view, education point of view. Then what was the effects of Charles II's stay in France? This is very important for us to know. Because when Charles II came back to throne, it altogether changed the complete taste of people, not only in art and culture, but in science also. So, because the king, when he went outside his country and lived somewhere under the influence of the other educated people, it's not only one thing that, morally these people were corrupt. That is from lower or lower middle class kind of mentality. They look at the royal people from that angle because of their openness, frankness. Otherwise, Charles II contribution was immense and profuse. So his stay in France is very important. Let us understand it now. So the very important question I saw in exam, that when Charles II was there in France, he visited theaters obviously, and he saw the French dramas and stage designs, which were far better than the things there in England. So Molière, you can write a name. Molière was the most famous playwright at that time, and his plays, I will make a separate video on that if needs be. That Molière, you should remember the name. That this writer actually influenced him a lot, and because of his dramas, he brought the taste back to England. Then court culture, Charles II adopted the luxurious and pleasure-loving court style of Louis XIV. So French people were far better, luxury life loving kind of people. So Charles II was used to it, and when he came back to England, he started influencing the court and the aristocratic people from that angle. So obviously the dramas were also made, from that angle. New stage technology he also saw there. So movable sceneries were there and stage machinery. Let me give you one example. That certain dramas of Shakespeare were also rewritten and restaged during this period. So I remember somewhere I read that Tempest, that play by Shakespeare, that thundering and all the kind of sounds. So these things were elaboratedly created in the background, which was absent, in the earlier dramas. So you can understand that movable scenery was there and elaborated stage machinery. Then more sophisticated play, because now aristocratic people and fashionable people used to visit theater. So it was not the theater of Shakespeare where single penny givers were also there, ruffians and goons and uneducated people were also there in the theater. No, it was specially meant for the aristocratic and fashionable people. So obviously the taste was refined, and accordingly the things were presented on the stage. I hope you understand the point. Now, why the people of England brought Charles II back? So this is also not very tough to understand. As I told you that Oliver Cromwell, when Charles II first was killed, he took over the throne. But he died in 1658 and his government weakened. and his son sat on the throne for 1.5 years, but then he was not very popular, and I think he was killed, and then Charles II was brought, and the Commonwealth, that kind of civil war was a failure, and military rule became unpopular. That you can see anywhere in the world, that military rule is a strict rule anywhere in any country. While I'm recording this, you can see the scenes there in different countries. World war, a kind of scenario is going on, and always remember that democracy always prevail. Okay, so the same thing happened in England also. So general monarch's intervention. Now this General Monk, we pronounce it. His name is very famous. Actually, he marched to London and supported the restoration. This name is quite new for all of you. But with the hard work, I just searched the books and came up with this particular name. Then public desire for stability, as I already told you that they wanted a political order and traditional monarchy in England, and that still prevail. Still till today you can see that monarchy prevails in England. There is another important point which you mostly don't find anywhere, that is Declaration of Breda in 1660. What does it mean? Charles II actually promised that he will give amnesty, religious tolerance and stability, which helped gain support. Means the people were quite tortured by the moral cruelty and moral policing of the Puritan people in the name of Commonwealth. So Charles II, when he came back, we call it Declaration of Breda, that he said that I will politically forgive the people, I will have some religious tolerance also. Means Catholics can also live here because it was a Protestant country now, and I will give a lot much stability so that all can develop, all can progress and prosper. Then what Charles II brought that changed theatre forever. Yes, this is very important to understand. What he brought, certain no innovations were there in England. First was women actors on stage. So female roles were played by boys earlier, before 1660. And after restoration, women literally came on stage. So that was a real, you can say, attraction, and people thronged that. They made the theaters crowded places because it happened first time in England. I will give you the details, like how many heroines were famous, what kind of roles in what play particular heroine played, and etc. etc. Clear? Theatre patents is another important question. That earlier you can see that during Shakespeare's time, or in the Jacobean age, James I's age, there were many drama companies. But now Charles II granted two official theatre companies patent. So King's Company, it was led by Thomas Killigrew. The question has already appeared in the exam. And Duke's Company, led by William Davenant. So you should understand this, that two companies were there and they were rivals, and later on they merged. That I will tell you later on in the lecture. So these companies dominated restoration theatre. Then proscenium stage and movable scenery. Movable scenery I have already talked about. But another important part is proscenium stage. What is proscenium stage? That some enlarged stage towards the audience. That is called proscenium. Okay, so that came from Italian and French stage design. This is also an important question. We also call it proscenium arch. Then big paintings were there in the background, and perspective stage settings were there. Perspective stage settings mean to say according to the scenes they used to change the settings. The new types of drama. Earlier you see that city comedy was there, tragedies were there, tragicomedies were there on the stage. But now a typical comedy of manners, in which the restoration, during the restoration period, the aristocratic class or the rich people, their manners were made fun of. Okay, heroic tragedy is another thing that I will discuss later on. And famous playwrights were John Dryden, William Congreve, George Etheridge, and Ephra Behn. The most important part is Ephra Behn, because she was the first woman dramatist of certain type, when she started writing plays, and they really became very successful on the stage. Now let me give you three critics' views on restoration drama, three or four. The first is John Dryden, because he was a critic also. He never said that restoration drama or restoration comedy is bad. He said that, it represented the refined wit and classical balance. Because when you write in a very witty way dialogues, it means you are quite intelligent. So he said that, when the dramatists write witty dialogues which can bring some laughter and clap and appreciation from the audience, it means you have some classical knowledge. So he praised the restoration comedy. He defended drama as a mirror of aristocratic society. So he was a true man of literature, and he said these views in his famous essay on dramatic poesy in 1668. Another is Thomas Babington Macaulay. Macaulay, you all know, uh, the one who imposed English on India. He was also a critic, dear friends. So he was against, restoration comedy. He criticized it. He said that it was filled with moral corruption and sexual immorality. And he argued it reflected the licentious court of Charles II. Licentious means here vulgar. Clear? So you can remember that Macaulay's views were negative. Then you can also write, this is very famous essay on comic dramatists of the Restoration. Then William Hazlitt, who was a famous romantic essay writer as well as a painter also, he admired brilliant wit and dialogue, but also noted the lack of moral seriousness. So his response is quite ambiguous. Clear? He wrote this line in lectures on the English comic writers. And then Charles Lamb's views on restoration comedy. I've given it in only 2 lines. That Charles Lamb defended restoration comedy and saying that its morality should not be judged by real life ethical standards. Because sometimes we also see that in certain Bollywood songs, they are quite vulgar, but that does not mean that they are reflecting our life. That is just for the sake of entertainment. So he said that it was artificial world of wit and fashion. So why you are judging it from the ethical standards of the real life? Okay. And according to him, these plays portray a world of comedy detached from real moral responsibility. So his view is also very fantastic and quite valuable. And you can write the name of this essay and you can read this essay also if you have time. Charles Lamb's famous essay on the artificial comedy of the last century. Because I remember once they asked a question on this, that material I've already supplied. Then why restoration comedies were instant hits, as I simply asked you earlier also? Because restoration comedies became immediately popular. So first, that after 18 years, the theaters, reopened. So people were excited. So they became famous. Audience curiosity about women actors, as I told you, it was first time there in England. Again, it made them, the dramas, famous. Witty dialogues and satire about fashionable society. Themes of love, marriage, adultery, and intrigue attracted aristocratic audience. It happens today also that if you talk about any film where kitty party is going on, or the women get together and they keep discussing their own lives and gossip, we call it. So these things were there. So in drama, these kind of women and gentlemen of aristocratic families, they found that their lives are reflected in that. So they were quite curious to know that what is happening on stage, because then they sometimes imitated the things from the stage in their life. Then royal patronage of Charles II made theatres fashionable again. So if royal patronage is there, then these people considered it quite fashionable to visit, because they got the place to show off their dresses, to show off their good fans, particularly to the ladies and all. So these were the reasons why these dramas became famous. Then major attractions of restoration theatre. As I earlier told you, brilliant wit and sexual humor was there. Sexual humor mostly attract people, double meaning dialogues and all. Fashionable costumes and aristocratic settings, as I told you, because the theaters were quite decorated also. Chandeliers were there, and mostly the theaters, these dramas were performed in the night. So unlike Shakespeare's dramas, which were performed in the daytime, these dramas were performed in the night, in the enclosed space where candles were lit and big chandeliers were there. So people used to visit these marvelous places. Actresses performed female roles. That was again, third time I'm repeating it. Movable sceneries and improved stage technology, and celebrity actors. One very important aspect which you will find in this lecture is that restoration comedy gave celebrity status to people. So people used to visit theaters also, so that they can see their famous or their beloved actresses particularly. Then female actresses. So as I promised you earlier that during the same lecture I'll talk about famous female artists. So Nell Gwen, she acted from 1650 to 1687. Then you will be surprised, I'm talking about that she performed on stage after 1660, but her career was already there because she used to perform in the royal courts also. Clear? So don't misjudge me that when restoration starts in 1660, why I have written 1650 here. Then she performed in Dryden's plays also, and she was a mistress of Charles II. Then Elizabeth Barry, 1658 to 1713. She was, famous tragic actress, dear friends. And famous role was Monimia in Otway's The Orphan. You can make it a note. This is very important question from examination point of view. And Brace Girdle was again very famous. She was known for the virtuous heroine roles. You can compare her with Meena Kumari, the tragic heroine of, like Dilip Kumar and Meena Kumari in earlier Bollywood films. They were considered to be quite sentimental kind of heroines. Clear? And Millamant in Congreve's The Way of the World's role was played by Anne Brace Girdle. This is very important question because The Way of the World by Congreve is the most famous restoration play. Then Susanna Mountfort, famous for breeches role, women dressed as men. We call them breeches roles. I'll give you, detail of this also. There was a question regarding breeches roles. So, and then there is a concept of she tragedies. So what is she tragedy? During the restoration comedies and restoration dramas, another kind of plays became famous. A she tragedy is a type of tragedy focusing on the suffering and emotional distress of a female heroine. So as I told you, I just talked about Meena Kumari. So victimization of females, their suffering, emotional pathos. So these things became famous on stage. And very famous were Thomas Otway's The Orphan and The Venice Preserved. In this, both the dramas are very famous. Now let us talk about breeches role. Breeches is a kind of, a dress. Breeches for trousers, quite, narrow from in the bottom in the ankle and then open towards the thighs. So these are called breeches. So the female actors used to dress like men by wearing these things. Purpose: display an actress' physical charm, provide comic situations, create gender disguise plots. So you can see that earlier during Shakespeare's times we get questions like in how many plays there was cross dressing when a girl becomes a boy. Clear? And because they all were boys and they remain boys. But here a real woman on the stage as an actress becomes a man. Clear? So cross-dressing kind of thing is there. And that was an attraction on the stage. Then celebrity status, I have already talked about that. First time in the history of England, these particular actors, they became celebrities. Because, because of their acting, certain crowds liking, they showed their preferences for a particular actor. So most of the playwrights particularly started taking them into consideration and wrote roles for them. So Thomas Betterton, Elizabeth Barry and Bryce Girdle, these three really got celebrity status. Then they can ask you a question on the benefit nights. There comes a term in restoration period or drama or theater or comedy, that what is benefit nights. Benefit nights were actually special performances in which the entire profit of one night was given to a particular actor or actresses, and its purpose was because the dramatist or the people who owned the theaters, they used to make these actors more popular and more available. So the whole night's income was given to them, and that was also, an important aspect, that they became really celebrity. Like today's actors and actresses are celebrity, because you must know that now these actors, particularly Shah Rukh Khan and all the others, they have started a thing in which they have their major share in the play, in the film, and because of that they are rich, and now we all talk about them. Clear? So audiences attended to honor their favorite performers. Then theatre patents were there. As I told you that Charles II gave patents. Royal patents means they were given a particular privilege and rights. So King's Company was run by Thomas Killigrew and Duke's Company by William Devenant. Clear? These were exclusive rights to perform drama in London. Then later on, I told you that these two companies merged. That is an important point. One question comes like when it happened. So it happened in 1682 because of the financial problems. Because they were unable to come up. This is very important to understand, that the dramatists were more prone to writing witty dramas or witty dialogues. So the stories and plots declined. So obviously now the performances were not as hit, and they earning less number of people started visiting the theaters and all. So one particular company, because there were two companies, and they were attracting each other's audience as customers. So one particular company had more resources, so they used to advertise more, and then people used to throng at their theaters more. So one particular company, later on felt the losses, and ultimately one united company came, which was a kind of they created a monopoly in London theatre. Clear? So they can ask you a question like two companies I've already talked about, and then they merged and they made United Company. Clear? Then Drury Lane, there is another term which is very famous during the discussion of all these things, and that is Drury Lane was actually a street built in 1663, and it is associated with King's Company, and it was most important theatre. It was quite rich, in chairs, in terms of chandeliers, in terms of its architecture and all. Now, how restoration theatres differed from earlier theatres? As I told you that restoration theatres were indoor theatres, and earlier theatres were open air theatres. Elizabethan theatre's stage was simple. It was proscenium stage, enlarged towards the audience. That little scenery was there. Here, movable painted sceneries were there. Male actors played female roles. Here, real actresses performed in the restoration period. Minimal stage machinery was there. Here, it is advanced stage technology. Clear? And earlier, the Globe and the Rose kind of theatres were famous. This question also appeared. But now only in the Drury Lane, only one theatre presided. Now comes the point, like, who was Samuel Pepys? We pronounce this not Pepys but as Pepys. He was a diarist, dear friends, and there comes a question here and there sometimes in the exam, all the set exams, all the gate exams, all the net exams, that what is his contribution actually. We'll make another separate lecture on that. But he was a diarist, first of all. He in his diary, which was written in the code language, and it was decoded just in the Victorian age, and in that detailed diary he maintained every detail, that when the king came, when he was coronated. So from 1660 to 1669, these 9 years period is totally written, all the most important in incidents. So theater performances he attended, he wrote about them. Like Hamlet play he saw for first time, and he was very pleased, and has written a very good comment on that. Provided first-hand description of restoration plays and actors. So whatever detail we get now, the credit goes to Samuel Pepys. His diary is a major historical source for restoration theatre. Clear? So Pepys watched Dryden's and Etheridge and Shadwell's plays. Clear? Then comes why restoration comedy is divided into early and late period. So here you come to know that the whole period was divided into two periods. Early restoration comedy 1660 to 1680. In that particular period, the characteristics were bold sexual humor, cynical view of marriage, and focus on aristocratic libertines. Libertines means the people who were sexually immoral. Then playwrights Etheridge, Wycherley, and Dryden. The most famous play is The Country Wife by George William Wycherley. Then late Restoration comedy, more moral tone, greater focus on marriage and social values. So now, here comes the question that in the early part, marriage was looked from a cynical point of view, but later on, marriage was seen from quite a moralistic point of view. Clear? And then influence of middle class morality, and these playwrights were William Congreve, George Farquhar, and John Vanbrugh. And the most famous example is The Way of the World. Now let us talk about this is all about today's lecture. In the next lecture, I'll talk about most important plays.